The absolute silence of deep space is a weight that crushes not just metal, but spirit. Commander Alex Orion stared at the dead control panel of the Starweaver, its once vibrant screens now as dark and empty as the void outside. 3 days. 3 days since the main engines had gasped their last, slain by a hidden pocket of screaming radiation. 3 days of drifting in the endless, star-studded black of uncharted space, where hope faded like the dimming emergency lights along the Starweaver's corpse-gray corridors. This was a tomb in motion, and they were its living occupants, counting down their final breaths. Want to know if they make it? How does this desperate story end? Like, subscribe, share, and comment below to follow every heart-pounding moment of their fight for survival. Any luck with the comms? Alex asked, the question a hollow ritual. He already knew the answer. It was etched in the weary slope of Navigator Tilen's silver-blue shoulders. Nothing, Tilen replied, his voice a soft monotone. The distress beacon broadcasts into the abyss. We are too far from any trade lane, any listening post. Our signal is a whisper in a hurricane. No one will hear it. He turned from his station, his large, dark eyes reflecting the cold gleam of alien constellations. We are ghosts already, Commander. We just haven't stopped moving yet. The Starweaver was a Nexar research vessel, a creature of elegant science and precise logic, never meant for the devouring deep where they now languished. Their mission had been simple, a routine cataloging of gravitational anomalies in the Kappa sector. But simplicity was a brittle shield against the universe's indifference. A perfect, silent storm of radiation had torn through their engine core, and now they hung adrift, a silver leaf on an infinite black river. The bridge door hissed open. Engineer Kevin entered, the sharp, ozone-tinged scent of burnt crystals clinging to her worksuit. She wiped a smear of black coolant from her slender hands with a cloth already stained with failure. Her expression, usually a mask of serene calculation, was fractured. The diagnosis is final, she said. The words like stones dropped into still water. The primary crystal matrix is shattered. The fractal harmonics are gone. We lack the facilities, the pure-grade materials. We lack everything required to even attempt a regeneration. She looked at Alex, and in her gaze, he saw the death of their only true hope. The core is a corpse, Commander. From the environmental station, Dr. Ben-Lure looked up, his datapad casting a pale glow on his concerned face. Then we must discuss resources, life support. How long, Kevin? Kevin's shoulders, usually held with the proud posture of her engineering caste, slumped. At full life support? 10 standard days. If we power down every non-essential system, auxiliary lighting, artificial gravity beyond bridge and medbay, all research terminals, we may stretch it to 12. 13, if we reduce oxygen saturation to minimum tolerances. The numbers hung in the chilled air. A death sentence read aloud. Alex rose and moved to the main viewport. The stars stared back, icy pinpricks of ancient light, magnificent and utterly uncaring. Their serene beauty was a cosmic cruelty. He placed a hand against the transparent aluminum, feeling the deep cold of the void seeping through. He was Commander Alex Orion, sworn to protect his crew. He had navigated stellar flares and negotiated with enigmatic alien species. But this was a slow, silent suffocation, a battle against an enemy you could not fight. We must enter the stasis pods, Alex said, his voice firm, cutting through the despair. Medical Bay. They will reduce our metabolic functions to near zero. It will extend our viable survival window from days to months. And then what? Talan challenged, a rare flash of emotion coloring his tone. We sleep while the Starweaver dies around us? We simply hope that someone stumbles upon our frozen grave before the backup power fails and the pods shut down forever? Alex turned to face them. The emergency lights painted their silver-blue skin in ghastly, shifting hues, making them look like specters already. They were Nexar, a species renowned across the galactic arm for their formidable intellect, their culture built upon pillars of flawless logic and impeccable efficiency. Emotion was a secondary consideration, a variable to be managed. Yet now, in the face of oblivion, Alex saw it flickering in their eyes. Fear, the most primal and illogical of all data points. Yes, Alex stated simply, meeting each of their gazes. Hope is the only variable we have left to manipulate. It is an inefficient, statistically poor strategy, but it is the only strategy. We must bank our lives on an infinitesimal probability. We must choose to believe in a miracle. Paragraph 2. The following ship cycle was a dirge of deactivation. Under Kavin's grim direction, the Starweaver was systematically put to sleep. Corridors that once hummed with activity became dark, hollow tunnels, lit only by the faint phosphorescent strips along the floors. The temperature plummeted as environmental systems were throttled back, their breath misting in the air. The constant, subliminal vibration of the ship's systems faded into an eerie, absolute stillness, broken only by the intermittent, forlorn ping of the distress beacon that Kavin had rerouted to the last dregs of primary power. If anyone passes within a light year, they will know we are here, she murmured, though the statement felt less like a fact and more like a prayer to deaf stars. They gathered in the small mess hall for what they knew, with Nexar certainty, would be their last shared meal. The nutrition packs were pasteurized, perfectly balanced, and utterly devoid of solace. The silence was thick, pressurized. The High Council will not search for us, Talen said finally, his voice quiet but clear in the stillness. He stated it not with bitterness, but with pure, unassailable logic. We are far beyond our planned trajectory. The cost-benefit analysis of mounting a deep void rescue operation for a single vessel against the resource expenditure and risk to other assets, the calculation is unequivocal. We will be marked as lost, cause terminal, resources reallocated. He took a deliberate bite of his food. It is the rational conclusion. No one argued. The Nexar prided themselves on seeing reality without the distortion of sentiment. The universe was a complex equation. Some variables were inevitably canceled out. Dr. Bendler pushed his half-eaten pack away. My familial unit will perform the remembrance at the next stellar alignment, he said, his vocal modulator catching slightly. They will place my resonance crystal in the household shrine and speak my name to the void. I had calculated a different outcome. I had projected a life cycle spanning centuries, contributing to the whole, witnessing the propagation of my genetic line. He looked at his hands, the long, elegant fingers that had healed and calibrated and discovered. This was not in my projections. Alex reached across the table, a gesture of connection that was more human than Nexar, and placed his hand on Bendler's arm. The skin was cool. We are not yet concluded, Doctor. We are simply pausing the equation. But the universe was not done testing their variables. On the fifth drift cycle, the ship's dormant sensors triggered a proximity alert. An asteroid field, a swirling debris cloud of ancient rock and ice, lay directly in their helpless path. Without thrusters, without navigation, they were a leaf floating toward a grinding mill. Shields are at minimal sustainment power, Kevin reported from engineering, her voice tight over the comm. They will deflect micron-scale particles. Anything larger than a pebble? She didn't finish. For 6 tense hours, the 4 of them crowded on the bridge, strapped into acceleration couches, watching the main screen as the Starweaver drifted serenely into the storm. It was a silent, slow-motion ballet of death. Glimpses of tumbling rock flashed in the external lights. A faint thump reverberated through the hull. Then another. The shield indicators flickered with each impact, their energy reserves dipping with every blow. Then came the hit. Not a thump, but a deafening, catastrophic crunch that shuddered through the very bones of the ship. The lights died, surged, and died again, leaving them in near-total darkness, punctuated by frantic crimson strobes. A chorus of alarm shrieks filled the air. Hull breach, storage section 3, atmospheric containment failure, the ship's VI announced with sterile panic. Sealing emergency bulkheads, Kevin yelled, her hands a blur on the auxiliary panel. They felt heavy clangs echo through the deck as doors slammed shut, compartmentalizing the dying vessel. When the chaos subsided, the damage report was a final, brutal blow. The breach had been contained, but storage section 3 and half of 4 were open to vacuum. 73% of their remaining food reserves, 40% of their water recycling stockpile, and the auxiliary power cells meant for the stasis pods were gone, shredded, and scattered into the void. The equation had just been brutally rewritten. Their timeline shrank from months to weeks. "We enter the pods, now," Alex commanded, his voice leaving no room for debate. "It is no longer a choice of preservation. It is our only remaining move." The medical bay was a crypt of cold steel and silent machinery. The 4 stasis pods stood in a row, like sleek, vertical coffins, their interiors glowing with a soft blue bioluminescent mist. Benler moved between them, making final adjustments. "I have programmed the revival sequence to trigger upon detection of a standardized rescue hailing frequency or a direct docking interface," he explained. "Failing that, they will maintain suspension until the primary power conduit fails. The pods will then terminate life support functions." "How long?" Talen asked, his eyes fixed on the pod that would be his. "With the auxiliary cells lost?" Kevin calculated swiftly. "Drawing only on the ship's emergency battery reserve, 60, perhaps 65 standard days. After that," she let the silence complete the thought. Alex looked at his crew, his friends. In 3 cycles of service, they had become more than a collective. They were a unit, a small, fragile bubble of consciousness in the uncaring dark. "We should leave records," he suggested. "For the finders, for our families, a final annotation to our lives." One by one, they sat before the ship's log recorder. Talen spoke to his bondmate, his voice steady, expressing pride in their shared achievements. Kevin addressed her engineering cadre, leaving technical notes and formulas, turning her farewell into a final lesson. Benler's message to his family was a soft poem of love and remembrance, his logic finally giving way to pure, aching emotion. Finally, Alex activated the recorder. "This is Commander Alex Orion of the Nexar research vessel Starweaver. Our mission has ended in catastrophic failure in Sector 12, Kappa. Our engines are dead. Our hull is compromised. Our crew survives, but our time runs short. We are entering suspended animation, a last gamble against the void. If you find this vessel and we still live, you have our eternal gratitude. If you find only silence, please forward these logs to the Nexar High Council on Nex Prime, and these personal messages to our designated kin. He paused, the weight of the moment pressing down. He thought of the cold, efficient logic that had governed his life, and found it wanting. He leaned closer, his next words not for the council, but for the universe itself. And to whatever intelligence, whatever soul might one day stand here listening, know this: we did not go gently into that starless night. We rationed our hope. We fought the cold equations. We clung to life until our fingers could cling no more. We fought. The pods hummed to life, a sound like frozen bees. Kevin entered hers first, her stern expression softening for a moment, as she gave a final slight nod to Alex. Then to Len, then Ben-Lur. Alex watched as the mist filled each chamber, as their breathing slowed to imperceptibility, as a delicate rime of frost crystallized on their silver-blue skin, preserving them in a moment of silent struggle. Ben-Lur gestured to the last two pods. "After you, Commander." Alex shook his head. "The captain is the last to leave the ship. It is a tradition from an old illogical species called humanity. I find I appreciate its sentiment today." A flicker of understanding passed between them. "The honor has been mine," Ben-Lur said quietly, and entered his pod. Alone. Alex walked the ghost ship. His footsteps were the only sound in the universe. The emergency lights painted long, stretching shadows that seemed to grasp at him. He passed the empty labs, the silent mess, the bridge where it had all begun. He laid a hand on the dead command console, a farewell to a loyal machine. Finally, he pulled up the last external camera feed on a portable pad. The view was a gut punch of solitude. The Starweaver, a slender sliver of crafted metal, hung against an infinite tapestry of black, punctuated only by the indifferent, icy fires of distant suns. They were a speck, a forgotten comma in a sentence written in darkness. The vastness was absolute, a crushing existential weight. "Someone," Alex whispered, the word torn from a place deeper than logic, a primal, species-old cry against the dark. "Please." In the medical bay, the final pod awaited. Alex climbed in, the gel-like lining conforming to his body. The lid closed with a definitive, pressurized hiss. The cold mist enveloped him, carrying the sweet, cloying scent of the preservative chemicals. Numbness crept up his limbs. His thoughts slowed, thickened, began to dissolve. As consciousness spiraled down into the frozen depths, one final, unanswerable question echoed in the vanishing chamber of his mind. In all the countless, empty cubic light years, what are the odds? The darkness did not answer. It simply swallowed him whole. Light years away from the frozen tomb of the Starweaver, the deep space exploration vessel Horizon carved a methodical path through the same silent sector. It was a workhorse of human design, all blunt angles, rugged plating, and the faint, constant hum of reliable fusion engines. A stark contrast to the Nexar vessel's elegant silence. To Captain Jack Ferris, it was home. To the corporate overlords who funded its mission, it was asset number 887, a mapping probe, seeking the glittering promise of rare mineral deposits. Captain Jack stifled a yawn, the kind born not of fatigue, but of profound, soul-deep monotony. For 3 weeks, the horizon had painted the void with sensor pulses, cataloging barren rocks and cosmic dust. The bridge was quiet, the crew of 12 moving through well-practiced routines. Navigator Mike Chen plotted courses with sleepy precision. First Officer Rob Sato reviewed supply manifests. The only sounds were the beeps of consoles and the low murmur of the life support systems. Another day, another dollar spent staring at nothing, Jack muttered, stretching in his command chair. Mike, what's the ETA on finishing this quadrant sweep? My coffee's getting lonely. Approximately 6 hours, Captain, Mike replied, not looking up from his screen. Then we can punch it for home, right on schedule. Schedule. The word was both mantra and cage. Jack dreamed of green hills and blue skies, of the solid, comforting mass of earth under his boots. He was about to order another round of synthetic coffee when Communications Officer Lisa Valdez suddenly stiffened at her station. "Captain," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the lethargy. "I'm picking up an anomaly." Jack swiveled his chair. "Define anomaly, Lisa." "Another magnetically interesting hunk of iron nickel. Pass." "No, sir." Her fingers danced across her panel, filtering, amplifying, isolating. "It's a signal, very faint, buried in background static. It's on an old frequency, really old, one we haven't used in decades." She looked up, her eyes wide. "It's a distress pattern, Captain, a repeating SOS loop." A silence, thick and immediate, fell over the bridge. In the deep black, a distress call was a sacred thing. It was a scream in a universe that produced only echoes. It cut through corporate schedules and personal yearning like a laser. Source? Jack was on his feet, moving to Lisa's station. Lisa worked for a tense moment, triangulating. Got it. Bearing 342 Mark 15, approximately 11 hours off our scheduled return vector at our current speed. Mike Chen swiveled, a frown creasing his face. "Sir, that would put us over 2 weeks behind schedule. Corporate will have our hides." "The penalty clauses for late delivery of the survey data." "I am aware of the clauses, Mike," Jack interrupted, his gaze fixed on the wavy line of the signal on Lisa's screen. It was weak, a heartbeat on life support. "Put it on speaker." A moment later, the bridge was filled with the sound, a repeating sequence of 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. Dit dit dit, da da da, dit dit dit. The classic, ancient cry for help. In the sterile, high-tech bridge of the horizon, it sounded like a ghost tapping from the grave. It was devoid of voice, of language, but it carried the pure, undiluted weight of desperation. Rob Sato was at Jack's shoulder. "That's not one of ours, not a current human protocol." "Alien," Lisa confirmed, her voice hushed. "The frequency modulation is all wrong for any species in our immediate database. It's old, fading." Jack paced the short length of the command deck, the weight of command a physical pressure. This wasn't a drill. This was a choice that would define him, his crew, his career. Diverting meant fuel expenditure, missed deadlines, potential danger from unknown ship conditions or survivors. It meant stepping off the safe, plotted path into the untracked wilds of consequence. "Captain?" Rob prompted softly. He knew the battle raging behind Jack's eyes. Jack stopped. He looked at the faces of his crew. Lisa, leaning forward with instinctual urgency. Mike, worried but waiting. Rob, steady and ready. He asked the only question that mattered, the one that dissolved corporate contracts and penalty clauses into cosmic irrelevance. What would we want someone to do if that was our signal whispering out there? If that was us, dying in the dark? The silence that followed was answer enough. "Mike," Jack said. His voice firm, decision crystallized. "Plot a new course. Maximum sustainable thrust to the signal's origin. Lisa, keep that channel open. Monitor for any change, any secondary signal. Rob, alert the crew. We're postponing our vacation. Prep medical for possible survivors, unknown physiology. Suit up a boarding team. Environmental suits, full isolation protocol until we know what we're dealing with. We're going fishing." A new energy, electric and grim, surged through the horizon. The comfortable boredom shattered, replaced by focused purpose. For 11 hours, the ship cut through the void, a spear aimed at a whisper. The signal grew steadily stronger, a siren song of despair pulling them in. "Visual range," Mike announced, his voice tight. On the main view screen, a shape resolved from the starfield. The alien vessel hung in the stillness, a majestic, tragic sculpture. It was sleek, with flowing, organic lines that spoke of a technology that valued aesthetics as much as function. Now it was a derelict. A long, jagged scar marred its hull near what appeared to be its stern. Only a handful of external lights still glimmered, weak and intermittent, like the last stubborn embers in a dead fire. "Scan it," Jack ordered, his eyes drinking in the haunting image. "Hull integrity is mostly intact, except for that breach near the aft storage modules," Rob reported from the sensor station. "Power signatures are infinitesimal, running on what has to be emergency cells only. Life support is in critical failure." "Life signs?" Jack asked, the core question. Rob adjusted his instruments, his face a mask of concentration. Then he blinked. "Yes. 4. Faint. Incredibly faint. They're registering in a state of deep metabolic suppression. Stasis of some kind." He looked up. "Captain, they're not just adrift. They're on ice, and the freezer is failing." "How long?" Lisa answered, her analysis pulling from the signal's degradation. "The beacon's power curve suggests it's been transmitting autonomously for approximately 62 standard days." The number hung in the air. 2 months. Jack tried to imagine it. The initial catastrophe. The slow, grinding realization of doom. The decision to freeze oneself, to surrender to cold sleep while your ship died around you. A horror story in slow motion. "Rob," Jack said quietly, "how long do they have?" Rob's expression was grim. "The energy readings from their stasis pods are fluctuating. They're on the last dregs. I'd estimate 72 hours, maybe less, before the systems crash and the pods become sarcophagi." The clock wasn't just ticking. It was in its final, frantic seconds. Any hesitation, any bureaucratic delay, and they would be retrieving corpses. "Then we're out of time for pondering," Jack said, his command voice taking on a hard edge. "Rob, you're with me. Assemble Team Alpha. Dr. Sam Cross, from Medical. Engineers Kelly Russo and Mark Jensen. Full EVA gear, portable power units, medical stabilization frames. We're going over there. Lisa, you have the con. Keep us painted with a tractor beam, ready to pull us back if that ship so much as shudders. Mike, keep us locked in tight." 2 hours later, The Horizon's utility shuttle, Cormorant, detached and crossed the short, chilling gulf of space. Inside, Jack's team were silent statues in their bulky environmental suits, their faceplates reflecting the eerie glow of instrument panels. Remember, Jack's voice crackled in their helmet comms. We have no idea what we're walking into. Atmospherics, gravity, pathogens, structural integrity, it's all unknown. These are Nexar, according to the database. Highly advanced, logical to a fault. If they're conscious, they'll be terrified. If they're not, we're grave robbers with a purpose. Move slow, stay sharp, watch each other's backs. Approaching the primary airlock, Mark Jensen reported, his hands steady on the controls. Reading minimal internal pressure. Trace atmospheric gases, mostly leaked coolant. Suit integrity is mandatory. The Cormorant docked with a soft, metallic clang that reverberated through the small craft. The connection to the derelict felt like a violation, an intrusion into a tomb. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the airlock cycled open, revealing the interior darkness of the Starweaver. They stepped into another world. Their helmet lamps cut swathes through an absolute profound blackness, revealing corridors that curved away in elegant alien architecture. The air, what little there was frigid and carried a strange metallic ozone scent. Their mag boots clanged softly on the decking, the sound absurdly loud in the consuming silence. Power levels are in the basement, Kelly Russo murmured, her scanner humming. Life support is at 8% and falling. This ship is a ghost. Sam, Jack said, which way to the life signs? Dr. Sam Cross consulted his medical tracker. Concentrated, one deck down, aft, about 50 meters. Strongest readings are coming from what looks like a medical bay. They moved like explorers in a cave, their lights painting fleeting, monstrous shadows on the walls. The emergency lighting, a faint, ghostly blue, gave the sleek metal an appearance of being carved from glacial ice. Every creak, every groan of the dying ship's superstructure made them freeze, hearts pounding. Fascinating, Mark Jensen whispered, running a gloved hand over a wall panel etched with flowing, mathematical script. The efficiency of the design, the heat dissipation here is beautiful, but the silence. Eyes forward, Mark, Jack chided gently, though he felt the same awe. We can geek out over their engineering after we save their engineers. They found the medical bay door partially open, jammed on its tracks when power had failed. Rob and Kelly forced it with a concerted heave, the screech of metal on metal unnervingly loud in the stillness. Inside, the scene was both beautiful and heartbreaking. 4 stasis pods stood in a silent row, each a vertical capsule of transparent alloy, filled with a shimmering, buenga, blue bioluminescent mist. Within, suspended like insects in amber, were the Nexar. Their silver-blue skin was pale, almost translucent, covered in a delicate, fractal pattern of frost. Their faces were serene in suspension, but the context screamed of a last, desperate retreat. Sam was at the nearest pod in an instant, his medical scanner interfacing with the alien readouts. They're alive, but it's threadbare. The metabolic suppression is breaking down. The chemical cocktails are degrading. These pods were a last stand, not a long-term solution. He looked at Jack through his faceplate. They're in a race against chemical decay, and they're losing. Can we move them? Yes, but we have to keep them in stasis during transit. If we wake them here, in this environment, with their physiology crashing, they'll die. Sam's voice was clinical, but urgent. We need to get them onto the Horizon's power grid and into our medbay. Then we can figure out how to wake them without killing them. How much time did we just buy them, Doc? Rob asked. Sam checked the pod's failing power feed. If we hadn't come, less than 48 hours. The cascade failure was already beginning. A cold knot tightened in Jack's gut. They had cut it so close. Kelly, Mark, stabilize these pods for transport. Link them to our portable power units. Gentle as you're handling your firstborn. Rob, help Sam prep the frames. I'm going to the bridge. I want to know what happened here. While the team worked with hushed efficiency, Jack made his way alone through the corpse of the Starweaver. The bridge was a masterpiece of minimalist design, now a monument to failure. He found the main log console. The ship's VI, its voice soft and androgynous even in translation, offered up the final records. He scrolled through the technical data, the radiation surge, the core shatter, the grim resource calculations. Then he found the crew's personal logs. He listened to Tielen's steadfast resignation, to Kevin's technical lament, to Bendler's emotional farewell. Finally, he played the commander's last entry. The translated voice was calm, logical, yet beneath it ran a current of defiance that resonated deep in Jack's human soul. We did not go gently into that starless night. We rationed our hope. We fought the cold equations. We clung to life until our fingers could cling no more. We fought. Jack stood in the silent dark bridge of the alien ship, surrounded by the ghost of another captain's courage. He placed a hand on the cold console. You did, he whispered to the emptiness, his voice thick. You fought, and because you did, we heard you. Now let's finish the fight. Back in the medbay, the pods were secured to anti-grav frames. The journey back to the shuttle, through the dark, groaning ship, was tense. Every shift, every sound, made them fear a catastrophic structural failure. But the Starweaver, even in death, held together long enough for them to escape. On the horizon, the real work began. The Nexar pods were integrated into the human ship's medical bay, their faint blue glow strengthening as they drank from a robust, unlimited power source for the first time in months. The alien and human technologies hissed and sparked in protest, but under Mark and Kelly's deft hands, a shaky compatibility was forced. The challenge now was revival. Dr. Sam Cross stared at the complex biochemical readouts, utterly out of his depth. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Their cellular structure is similar, but the stabilizing agents, the neural inhibitors, it's a symphony, and I don't know the instruments, let alone the music. One wrong note, and we cause irreversible neural damage, or systemic collapse. Mark Jensen, however, was in his element. He had the translation device linked to the pod's systems, his eyes scanning streams of alien code. It's not just biology, Sam, it's math. Their whole system is built on harmonic mathematical principles. Look at this sequence. It's a declining Fibonacci series applied to neurochemical release. It's beautiful. He looked up, a grin spreading across his face. I can do this. I can find the wake-up sequence. It's a puzzle, and the solution is in the pattern. Jack watched the 4 frozen faces. You're sure, Mark? This isn't a simulation. There are no second chances. I'm sure, Captain, Mark said, his confidence born of understanding, not arrogance. They designed this with a kind of elegant clarity. It's meant to be understood. It's a message in a bottle, and the instructions are written on the cork. 6 hours of relentless work passed. Finally, Mark stood back. I've isolated the revival protocol. It's a staggered sequence. We should wake the commander first. Their neurosignature is the strongest. If there are complications, they'll be the most resilient. Jack took a deep breath. Do it. The sequence was initiated. In Pod 1, the blue mist began to swirl with new purpose, thinning, dissolving. The monitors showed a sudden, sharp uptick in brain activity, a heart beginning to beat with deliberate, slow thumps. Inside the pod, Commander Alex Orion felt sensation return as a violent, unwelcome intrusion. First was a deep, bone-aching cold, followed by a searing heat as circulatory systems roared back to life. His mind surfaced from a dark of black syrup, thoughts sluggish, confused. System failure. Pod breach. The end. His eyelids, heavy as stone slabs, flickered open. Vision was a blur of light and shadow. A shape coalesced above him. Not the smooth, silver-blue curves of a Nexar face. This was rounded. Pink and tan skin. A fringe of dark hair above eyes that were round, dark, and brimming with an emotion Alex's groggy mind couldn't immediately classify. Human. A sound reached him. Guttural, shapeless words. The human spoke again, slower. Another human appeared, holding a flexible container with a sipping tube. The universal gesture was clear. Alex's throat was a desert of cracked clay. With a trembling hand, he took the proffered water and drank. It was blessedly cool, a primal comfort. He tried to speak, his vocalizer struggling. My crew? He managed in broken universal trade, the crude, basic language of interstellar commerce. The lead human seemed to understand. He pointed to the other pods, still glowing. Safe. You first. He placed a hand on his own chest. I am Jack. Captain, Horizon. We found your signal. Alex absorbed this. The human ship. The rescue. The impossible odds. Defeated. How long? Your ship drifted for 2 months, Jack said gently. 2 months. The edge of the pod's viable duration. They had been plucked from the very precipice. A feeling, vast and unfamiliar, welled up in Alex's chest, bypassing all logical analysis. It was a profound, disorienting wave of gratitude, so powerful it felt like a physical force. He looked at the human captain, this illogical, impulsive, pink-skinned creature who had veered off the safe path. Thank you, Alex whispered. The words, in any language, felt desperately inadequate. But for Jack Ferris, they were everything. The mission was no longer a corporate diversion. It was a success. They had answered the echo in the void. And the void, for once, had answered back. The medical bay of the Horizon became an unlikely crucible where two civilizations met, not across a negotiation table, but across the gulf of life and death. Commander Alex Orion, wrapped in a thermal blanket that felt coarse and alien, watched as the humans worked with a frantic, yet oddly coordinated energy to revive his crew. Dr. Sam Cross, with Alex's halting guidance, carefully adjusted the chemical balances for each Nexar physiology. Benler was revived next, the doctor's analytical mind immediately engaging with Sam's methods, his initial shock giving way to intense professional curiosity. You are using a broad-spectrum neurostabilizer before introducing the adrenal catalyst? Benler asked, his voice still weak but sharp. That is counterintuitive. The risk of synaptic shock is high. Sam nodded, wiping his brow. It is, but your readings showed elevated neural fragility. The stabilizer is a buffer. It's inefficient, maybe even crude, but it's cautious. Sometimes you have to protect the system before you jumpstart it. Inefficient? Bendler echoed, the word tasting familiar on his tongue, a judgment. But he watched the human biomonitors, saw the steady, safe climb of his crewmates' vitals, yet effective in this specific, suboptimal scenario. Fascinating. Talen and Kevin were brought back more slowly, their bodies requiring delicate recalibration. Navigator Talen awoke wary, his dark eyes tracking every human movement with the suspicion of a mathematician who has discovered an irrational number at the heart of his proof. Engineer Kevin, however, once the disorientation passed, was alight with a purely technical fervor. She ignored the weakness in her limbs, her gaze locked on the exposed conduits and jury-rigged interfaces where Mark and Kelly had fused Nexar pod systems to human power grids. This connection, it should not sustain a stable feedback loop, she murmured, reaching out a slender blue finger before stopping herself. The impedance mismatch alone would cause a cascade failure within minutes. Mark Jensen grinned, holding up a tangle of adaptive couplers and a small buzzing harmonic regulator. It would if you tried to make them perfect partners. We didn't. We gave them a translator. This little guy listens to the Nexar power frequency, hums along, and convinces the human grid to hum the same tune. It's a lie. A beautiful, functional lie. Kevin stared, her mind visibly wrestling with the concept. You introduced a controlled incompatibility to manage a larger incompatibility. You solved imperfection with more imperfection. We made it work, Kelly Russo said, simply, leaning against a console. Pretty isn't the goal. Functioning is. Communication was a patchwork of universal trade, gesturing, and Mark's rapidly improving translation algorithm. The device learned with each conversation, its robotic voice growing smoother, catching nuances. At a shared meal in the Horizons mess, the humans eating spiced hydroponic vegetable stew, the Nexar sipping carefully synthesized nutrient broths, the cultural fissures yawned wide. Alex, through the translator, turned to Jack. Your people diverted your mission. You consumed significant resources, fuel, medical supplies, crew time. You risked contact with an unknown species and structural damage boarding our vessel. He paused, formulating the question that had gnawed at him since waking. The cost-benefit analysis for this action is profoundly negative. Your corporation will penalize you. Why was this action taken? Jack paused, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. The question, so logically stark, felt alien to him. You needed help. That is a condition, not a justification, Talen interjected, his tone not hostile, but probing. Need is universal. Response is not. The logical response to an unfixable, resource-draining scenario is non-intervention. It preserves resources for more probable, more beneficial outcomes. Why was our need the dominant variable? The human crew exchanged glances. Rob Sato leaned forward. Because leaving you there wasn't an option. Every action is an option, Ben-Lure said softly. Not for us, Kelly fired back, her emotional rawness contrasting with their calm. Not and still be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. Not and still call ourselves people. Kevin frowned. So it is an emotional imperative. A desire to avoid internal psychological discomfort. You traded tangible, material resources for an intangible emotional state. "We traded fuel for 4 lives," Jack stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for algorithmic debate. The finality in it silenced the Nexar. The equation, in human terms, was just that simple and that profound. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, Alex stood with Jack as the horizon, with the derelict Starweaver now in tow, made its way toward Frontier Station 12. The stars streamed by, endless and indifferent. "Your engineer, Kevin," Jack said. "She and Kelly have been locked in the cargo bay for hours with what's left of your engine core. Kelly thinks she might have an idea." Alex felt a flutter of something akin to dread. The crystal matrix is shattered. Its harmonic resonance is destroyed. It is not a matter of repair. It is a matter of mourning. "Kelly doesn't do mourning," Jack replied with a faint smile. "She does making do." In the makeshift workshop, the scene was one of beautiful heresy. The remains of the Nexar crystal drive were laid out on a workbench, jagged, dark fragments that once pulsed with coherent energy. Kevin stood rigid, her arms crossed, a living monument to futility. "It cannot be done," she stated for the 10th time. "The matrix requires perfect geometric alignment and identical crystalline lattice structures. These are corpses." Pelly Russo, smudges of grease on her face, didn't look up from her scanner. "They're not corpses. They're still holding a charge. See? Faint, chaotic, but it's there." She picked up a fractured shard. "You keep saying perfect. What if perfect got you stranded? What if good enough gets you home?" "The concepts are mutually exclusive," Kevin insisted. "A suboptimal engine core cannot generate a stable warp field. It would tear the ship apart or simply fail." "Who said anything about a warp field?" Kelly asked, a wild light in her eyes. She gestured to a holographic schematic she'd been building. It showed the fragments arranged in a chaotic, asymmetrical web, connected by hair-thin filaments of a superconducting material from Horizon Stores. "We're not trying to rebuild your star drive. We're trying to build a new thing. A pulse drive. We use these fragments like irregular batteries. We discharge them in a sequenced burst, channel it through these conduits here to create a minute, asymmetrical thrust. It'll be ugly. It'll be slow. It'll require constant manual adjustment. But it will create forward momentum." Kevin stared at the design. It was an abomination. It violated a dozen core principles of Nexar physics. It was a Rube Goldberg machine of desperation. The energy conversion loss would be catastrophic. The strain on the secondary systems, the required navigational corrections, would be a constant manual calculation nightmare. "Yeah," Kelly agreed, finally looking at her. "It'll be a pig to fly. But will it move the ship?" Kevin ran the simulations in her mind, using the human parameters. The numbers were terrible. The efficiency rating was laughable. The probability of partial failure within hours was high. But the final variable, the one she input reluctantly, was thrust. And the simulation returned a number. Small, pathetic, but greater than 0. It would produce acceleration, she admitted, the words tasting like ash. Approximately 0.02 standard gravities. At that rate, the journey to the nearest Nexar outpost would take years. "Good thing we're towing you to a repair station 5 days away then," Kelly said, beaming. "We just need it to work for a few hours, to give your ship minimal maneuverability for final docking procedures. To give you back control, even if it's just a whisper of it. The idea struck Kevin not as engineering, but as philosophy. It was the absolute rejection of the binary. Not perfect or dead, but broken and functional. It was an embrace of the interim, the provisional. For a Nexar, whose culture was built upon reaching final, optimal states, it was revolutionary and deeply unsettling. Meanwhile, Dr. Bendler observed Sam treating a minor laser burn on Rob's arm. Instead of a tissue regenerator, Sam cleaned it with an antiseptic solution and applied a polymer-based bandage that slowly released antibiotics and painkillers. "You are allowing the body to do the majority of the work," Bendler noted. "It knows how," Sam said. "I just keep the area clean and give it the tools. The body adapts. The scar tissue will be stronger there." "Inefficient," Bendler said, then quickly added, "by the metrics of speed, but you introduce a variable of resilience. The body learns from the injury. A fascinating trade-off." On the bridge, Telen watched Jack pilot the combined mass of the two ships. The human captain consulted his digital charts, but also stared at the stellar view, his eyes tracing patterns invisible to sensors. "Slight adjustment to port, Mike," Jack said. "See that density of stellar nursery nebula ahead? The gravitational lensing there can create phantom sensor echoes. I'd rather give it a wide berth." Period. Telen checked the horizon's long-range scans. They showed nothing but predictable micro-gravitational waves. There is no data suggesting turbulence. "Call it a hunch," Jack said, making the adjustment. "A hunch is not data." "No," Jack agreed. "It's the sum of experience, filtered through a pattern recognition machine." He tapped his temple. "This one. It saved my hide more times than the official manuals." Period. Telen was silent. He was beginning to understand that human decision-making was not a flawed version of logic, but a different system altogether. One that incorporated fuzzy variables like intuition, aesthetic preference, and moral feeling into its calculations. It was infuriatingly imprecise. It was also, he had to admit, why he was alive. After days of collaborative struggle, the moment of truth arrived in the Starweaver's scorched engineering bay. Kelly and Kevin's patchwork engine, a grotesque sculpture of shattered crystals, human superconductors, and hope, was integrated into the secondary propulsion system. The entire senior crew of both ships gathered, crowded into the space. "Initialization sequence is unorthodox," Kevin said, her finger hovering over the control she had designed. "Power at 5%. She activated it. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a sound like grinding glass and screaming electrons filled the bay. The crystal fragments lit up, not with their former pure, coherent light, but with a wild, strobing, multi-hued glare. Energy arced between the human-conducted filaments. The deck plates vibrated with a discordant, shuddering rhythm. Alarms shrieked on the horizon's bridge, monitoring the strain. "It's holding," Kelly yelled over the din, her eyes glued to a stress diagram. "It's ugly, but it's holding. Thrust is at 0.018 Gs and climbing." On the main viewer aboard the horizon, Lisa called out, "Confirmed. The Starweaver is showing independent lateral movement. It's answering the helm." Alex, standing beside Jack on the horizon's bridge, watched the sensor display as his ship, his dead, beautiful ship, grudgingly, painfully, began to move under its own minuscule power. It was a limping, staggering motion. It was a miracle of pure stubbornness. He looked at Kelly's triumphant, grimy face on the comm screen, then at Kevin's expression of awe and horror. He understood in that moment that the humans hadn't just saved their lives. They had performed a kind of cultural archaeology, digging down through the layers of perfect, dead logic and striking a vein of raw, adaptive will that he recognized with a shock in himself. It was the will that had made him record that final defiant log. "You have taken broken things," Alex said to Jack, the translator struggling with the depth of the concept, "and from them forged a new kind of tool. Not a replacement, but an evolution." Jack nodded. "We're good at that. It's born from a long history of being breakable ourselves." The final leg of the journey to Frontier Station 12 was a festival of incongruity. The sleek, elegant Nexar vessel, now pulsing with a violent rainbow light heart, limped alongside the rugged horizon. Docking was a masterpiece of improvisation, with the Starweaver's pathetic, uneven thrust requiring constant counter-adjustment from the horizon's tractors. But they did it. The graveyard ship and its savior settled into their berths. At the station, the story preceded them. They were celebrities of survival. As the Nexar crew disembarked, they were met not with the cold efficiency of their own people, but with the bewildering, warm chaos of a multi-species port. Beings of all shapes and sizes looked on with curiosity and respect. In a quiet conference room, Alex received the formal communique from the Nexar High Council. It was a request for a full debriefing, with specific emphasis on the unsolicited intervention of the human vessel Horizon and the unconventional methods employed. Ben-Lor looked concerned. "They will seek the logic. They will not find the one we were taught. Then we will teach them a new one," Alex said, a newfound conviction in his voice. "We will report not just the events, but the outcomes. We will show them that the human inefficiencies, their adaptability, their acceptance of imperfection, their moral imperative, produced results that Nexar logic had already written off as impossible. We survived not in spite of their illogic, but because of it." On their final evening before the Nexar transport arrived, the two crews shared a gathering in the station's observation lounge. The gifts exchanged were not mere tokens, they were bridges. Alex presented Jack with the communication crystal, a flawless Nexar gem, now etched with a deliberately imperfect, asymmetrical frequency modulator, designed by Kevin and Kelly together. "It will not align with standard Nexar arrays," Alex explained. "It will only talk to Horizon, a private channel for friends." Kevin gave Kelly the modified tool, its handle recontoured for a human grip. "It is calibrated to the resonant frequency of the crystal fragments we used," she said, "for when you need to make other broken things work." When the moment for final words came, Alex stood before the assembled group, the silver blue and the pink tan, the logical and the intuitive, the rescued and the rescuers. "We floated in the dark, believing the universe was a cold equation that had solved for our deletion," he began, the translator capturing the solemnity. "We were wrong. The universe is also connection. It is the improbable signal found. It is the hand extended across the void, for no reason other than it is there to be extended." He looked at Jack, then at each human. "You have shown us that logic has many faces. There is the logic of the perfect crystal, and it is beautiful. But there is also the logic of the patched conduit, the logic of the helping hand, the logic of the heart that refuses to accept a solvable problem as unsolvable. You did not just save our lives, you expanded our definition of what life and living can be. You prove that the most important calculations are sometimes the ones we perform, not with our minds, but with our conscience. Jack responded, his voice thick. And maybe you've shown us that not every problem needs a hammer. Sometimes it needs the precise, patient touch we saw in all of you. Maybe the best way forward isn't my way or your way. Maybe it's a new way, built somewhere in the middle. As they parted, promises of future meetings were exchanged. Coordinates shared. The Nexar transport, a vessel of flawless silver, departed for home. The Horizon, its schedule in tatters, but its soul fortified, prepared for its return to Earth. Its logs now containing a story far more valuable than any mineral survey. Back on the bridge of the Horizon, Jack held the communication crystal. It glowed with a steady, warm light, a tangible thread connecting him to a friend in a distant corner of the galaxy. He looked out at the stars, no longer just points of light or destinations for corporate profit, but now also potential homes for other souls, other stories. And floating in the now empty observation lounge of Frontier Station 12, a station technician later found a datapad left behind. On it, accessed in a public log, was the final private addition Commander Alex Orion had made to his official report before departing. It was not addressed to the High Council. It was a single line, a personal epitaph for an old life, and a creed for a new one. In the end, the cold equations of the void are no match for the warm, imperfect, glorious algebra of us.